The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, Chapter 1, continued. It was the first genuinely shining day of summer, a time of year which brought Eleanor always to aching memories of her early childhood, when it seemed to be summer all the time. She could not remember a winter before her father's death, on a cold, wet day. She had taken to wondering lately during these swift-counted years what had been done with all those wasted summer days. I am foolish, she told herself. Early, every summer, I am very foolish. I'm grown up now and know the values of things. Nothing is ever really wasted. She believed, sensibly, even one's childhood. And then each year, one summer morning, the warm wind would come down the city street where she walked, and she would be touched with the little cold thought, I have let more time go by. Yet, this morning, driving the little car which she and her sister owned together, apprehensive lest they might still realize she had come after all and just taken it away, going docilely along the street, following the lines of traffic, stopping when she was bidden, and turning when she could, she smiled out at the sunlight, slanting along the street, and thought, I am going. I have finally taken a step. Always before, when she had her sister's permission to drive the little car, she had gone cautiously, moving with extreme care to avoid even the slightest scratch or mar, which might irritate her sister. But today, with her carton on the back seat and her suitcase on the floor, her gloves and pocketbook and light coat on the seat beside her, the car belonged entirely to her, a little contained world all her own. I am really going, she thought. At the last traffic light in the city, before she turned to go onto the great highway out of town, she stopped, waiting, and slid Dr. Montague's letter out of her pocket. I will not even need a map, she thought. He must be a very careful man. Route 39 to Ashton, the letter said, and then turn left onto Route 5, going west. Follow this for a little less than 30 miles, and you will come to the small village of Hillsdale. Go through Hillsdale to the corner with a gas station on the left and a church on the right, and turn left here onto what seems to be a narrow country road. You will be going up into the hills, and the road is very poor. Follow this road to the end, about 6 miles, and you will come to the gates of Hill House. I am making these directions so detailed because it is inadvisable to stop in Hillsdale to ask your way. The people there are rude strangers and openly hostile to anyone inquiring about Hill House. I am very happy that you will be joining us in Hill House, and will take great pleasure in making your acquaintance on Thursday, the 21st of June. The light had changed. She turned onto the highway and was free of the city. No one, she thought, can catch me now. They don't even know which way I'm going. She'd never driven far alone before. The notion of dividing her lovely journey into miles and hours was silly. She saw it, bringing her car with precision between the line on the road and the line of trees beside the road, as a passage of moments, each one new, carrying her along with them, taking her down a path of incredible novelty to a new place. The journey itself was her positive action, her destination vague, unimagined, perhaps non-existent. She meant to savor each turn of her traveling, loving the road and the trees and the houses and the small ugly towns, teasing herself with the notion that she might take it into her head to stop just anywhere and never leave again. She might pull her car to the side of the highway, although that was not allowed, she told herself. She would be punished if she really did, and leave it behind while she wandered off, past the trees into the soft, welcoming country beyond. She might wander till she was exhausted, chasing butterflies or following a stream, and then come at nightfall to the hut of some poor woodcutter who would offer her shelter. She might make her home forever in East Barrington or Desmond or the incorporated village of Burke. She might never leave the road at all, but just hurry on and on until the wheels of the car were worn to nothing, and she had come to the end of the world. And, she thought, I might just go along to Hill House, where I am expected and where I am being given shelter and room and board, and a small token salary in consideration of forsaking my commitments and involvements in the city and running away to see the world. I wonder what Dr. Montague is like. I wonder what Hill House is like. I wonder who else will be there. She was well away from the city now, watching for the turning onto Route 39, that magic thread of road Dr. Montague had chosen for her, out of all the roads in the world, to bring her safely to him and to Hill House. No other road could lead her from where she was to where she wanted to be. Dr. Montague was confirmed, made infallible. Under the sign which pointed the way to Route 39 was another sign saying Ashton, 121 miles. The road, her intimate friend now, turned and dipped, going around turns where surprises waited. Once a cow regarding her over a fence. Once an incurious dog. Down into the hollows where small towns lay. Past fields and orchards. On the main street of one village she passed a vast house, pillared and walled, with shutters over the windows and a pair of stone lions guarding the steps, and she thought that perhaps she might live there, dusting the lions each morning and patting their heads good night. Time is beginning this morning in June, she assured herself. But it is a time that is strangely new, and of itself, in these few seconds, I have lived a lifetime in a house with 2 lions in front. Every morning I swept the porch and dusted the lions, and every evening I patted their heads good night, and once a week I washed their faces and manes and paws with warm water and soda, and cleaned between their teeth with a swab. Inside the house the rooms were tall and clear, with shining floors and polished windows. A little dainty old lady took care of me, moving starchily with a silver tea service on a tray, and bringing me a glass of elderberry wine each evening for my health's sake. I took my dinner alone in the long, quiet dining room, at the gleaming table, and between the tall windows the white paneling of the walls shone in the candlelight. I dined upon a bird and radishes from the garden and homemade plum jam. When I slept, it was under a canopy of white organdy, and a nightlight guarded me from the hall. People bowed to me on the streets of the town because everyone was very proud of my lions. When I died, she had left the town far behind by now, and was going past some dirty closed lunch stands and torn signs. There had been a fair somewhere near here once, long ago, with motorcycle races. The signs still carried fragments of words. Dare, one of them read, and another, evil. And she laughed at herself, perceiving how she sought out omens everywhere. The word is daredevil, Eleanor. Daredevil drivers. And she slowed her car because she was driving too fast and might reach Hill House too soon. At one spot she stopped altogether beside the road to stare in disbelief and wonder. Along the road for perhaps a quarter of a mile, she had been passing and admiring a row of splendid tended oleanders, blooming pink and white in a steady row. Now she had come to the gateway they protected, and past the gateway the trees continued. The gateway was no more than a pair of ruined stone pillars, with a road leading away between them into empty fields. she could see that the oleander trees cut away from the road and ran up each side of a great square. And she could see all the way to the farther side of the square, which was a line of oleander trees seemingly going along a little river. Inside the oleander square there was nothing. No house, no building, nothing but the straight road, going across and ending at the stream. Now what was here, she wondered? What was here and is gone? Or what was going to be here and never came? Was it going to be a house or a garden or an orchard? Were they driven away forever, or are they coming back? Oleanders are poisonous, she remembered. Could they be guarding something? She thought, will I get out of my car and go between the ruined gates, and then, once I am in the magic oleander square, find that I have wandered into a fairyland, protected poisonously from the eyes of people passing? Once I have stepped between the magic gateposts, will I find myself through the protective barrier, the spell broken? I will go into a sweet garden with fountains and low benches and roses trained over arbors, and find one path, jeweled perhaps with rubies and emeralds, soft enough for a king's daughter to walk upon, with little sandaled feet, and it will lead me directly to the palace, which lies under a spell. I will walk up low stone steps, past stone lions guarding, and into a courtyard where a fountain plays and the queen waits, weeping, for the princess to return. She will drop her embroidery when she sees me and cry out to palace servants, stirring at last after their long sleep, to prepare a great feast because the enchantment is ended, and the palace is itself again, and we shall live happily ever after. No, of course, she thought, turning to start her car again. Once the palace becomes visible and the spell is broken, the whole spell will be broken, and all this countryside outside the oleanders will return to its proper form, fading away, towns and signs and cows, into a soft picture from a fairy tale. Then, coming down from the hills, there will be a prince, riding, bright in green and silver, with 100 bowmen riding behind him, pennants stirring, horses tossing, jewels flashing. She laughed and turned to smile goodbye at the magic oleanders. Another day, she told them, another day I'll come back and break your spell. She stopped for lunch after she had driven 100 miles and a mile. She found a country restaurant which advertised itself as an old mill, and found herself seated incredibly upon a balcony over a dashing stream, looking down upon wet rocks and the intoxicating sparkle of moving water, with a cut glass bowl of cottage cheese on the table before her, and corn sticks in a napkin, because this was a time and a land where enchantments were swiftly made and broken. She wanted to linger over her lunch, knowing that Hill House always waited for her at the end of her day. The only other people in the dining room were a family party, a mother and father with a small boy and girl, and they talked to one another softly and gently. And once the little girl turned and regarded Eleanor with frank curiosity, and after a minute smiled. The light from the stream below touched the ceiling and the polished tables and glanced along the little girl's curls, and the little girl's mother said, "She wants her cup of stars." Eleanor looked up surprised. The little girl was sliding back in her chair, sullenly refusing her milk, while her father frowned and her brother giggled, and her mother said calmly, "She wants her cup of stars." Indeed, yes, Eleanor thought. Indeed, so do I. A cup of stars, of course. Her little cup, the mother was explaining, smiling apologetically at the waitress, who was thunderstruck at the thought that the mill's good country milk was not rich enough for the little girl. It has stars in the bottom, and she always drinks her milk from it at home. She calls it her cup of stars because she can see the stars while she drinks her milk. The waitress nodded, unconvinced, and the mother told the little girl, "You'll have your milk from your cup of stars tonight, when we get home, but just for now, just to be a very good little girl, will you take a little milk from this glass?" "Don't do it," Eleanor told the little girl. "Insist on your cup of stars. Once they've trapped you into being like everyone else, you will never see your cup of stars again. Don't do it." And the little girl glanced at her and smiled, a little subtle, dimpling, wholly comprehending smile, and shook her head stubbornly at the glass. Brave girl, Eleanor thought. Wise, brave girl. "You're spoiling her," the father said. "She ought not to be allowed these whims." "Just this once," the mother said. She put down the glass of milk and touched the little girl gently on the hand. "Eat your ice cream," she said. When they left, the little girl waved goodbye to Eleanor, and Eleanor waved back, sitting in joyful loneliness to finish her coffee, while the gay stream tumbled along below her. "I have not very much farther to go," Eleanor thought. "I am more than halfway there. Journey's end," she thought, and far back in her mind, sparkling like the little stream, a tag end of a tune danced through her head, bringing distantly a word or so. "In delay there lies no plenty," she thought. "In delay there lies no plenty." She nearly stopped forever just outside Ashton, because she came to a tiny cottage, buried in a garden. I could live there all alone, she thought, slowing the car to look down the winding garden path to the small blue front door, with perfectly a white cat on the step. No one would ever find me there either, behind all those roses, and just to make sure I would plant oleanders by the road. I will light a fire in the cool evenings and toast apples at my own hearth. I will raise white cats and sew white curtains for the windows, and sometimes come out of my door to go to the store to buy cinnamon and tea and thread. People will come to me to have their fortunes told, and I will brew love potions for sad maidens. I will have a robin, but the cottage was far behind, and it was time to look for her new road, so carefully charted by Dr. Montague. "Turn left onto Route 5 going west," his letter said, and as efficiently and promptly as though he had been guiding her from some spot far away, moving her car with controls in his hands, it was done. She was on Route 5 going west. And her journey was nearly done. In spite of what he said, though, she thought, I will stop in Hillsdale for a minute, just for a cup of coffee, because I cannot bear to have my long trip end so soon. It was not really disobeying anyway. The letter said it was inadvisable to stop in Hillsdale to ask the way, not forbidden to stop for coffee. And perhaps if I don't mention Hill House, I will not be doing wrong. Anyway, she thought obscurely, it's my last chance. Hillsdale was upon her before she knew it, a tangled, disorderly mess of dirty houses and crooked streets. It was small. Once she had come onto the main street, she could see the corner at the end, with the gas station and the church. There seemed to be only one place to stop for coffee, and that was an unattractive diner. But Eleanor was bound to stop in Hillsdale, and so she brought her car to the broken curb in front of the diner and got out. After a minute's thought, with a silent nod to Hillsdale, she locked the car, mindful of her suitcase on the floor and the carton on the back seat. I will not spend long in Hillsdale, she thought, looking up and down the street, which managed even in the sunlight to be dark and ugly. A dog slept uneasily in the shade against a wall. A woman stood in a doorway across the street and looked at Eleanor, and 2 young boys lounged against a fence, elaborately silent. Eleanor, who was afraid of strange dogs and jeering women and young hoodlums, went quickly into the diner, clutching her pocketbook and her car keys. Inside, she found a counter with a chinless, tired girl behind it, and a man sitting at the end, eating. She wondered briefly how hungry he must have been to come in here at all, when she looked at the gray counter and the smeared glass bowl over a plate of donuts. "Coffee," she said to the girl behind the counter, and the girl turned wearily and tumbled down a cup from the piles on the shelves. "I will have to drink this coffee because I said I was going to," Eleanor told herself sternly, "but next time I will listen to Dr. Montague." There was some elaborate joke going on between the man eating and the girl behind the counter. When she set Eleanor's coffee down, she glanced at him and half smiled, and he shrugged, and then the girl laughed. Eleanor looked up, but the girl was examining her fingernails, and the man was wiping his plate with bread. Perhaps Eleanor's coffee was poisoned. It certainly looked it. Determined to plumb the village of Hillsdale to its lowest depths, Eleanor said to the girl, "I'll have one of those donuts too, please." And the girl, glancing sideways at the man, slid one of the donuts onto a dish and set it down in front of Eleanor, and laughed when she got another look from the man. "This is a pretty little town," Eleanor said to the girl. "What is it called?" The girl stared at her. Perhaps no one had ever before had the audacity to call Hillsdale a pretty little town. After a moment, the girl looked again at the man, as though calling for confirmation, and said, "Hillsdale." "Have you lived here long?" Eleanor asked. "I'm not going to mention Hill House," she assured Mr. Montague far away. "I just want to waste a little time." "Yeah," the girl said. "It must be pleasant living in a small town like this. I come from the city." "Yeah? Do you like it here?" "It's all right," the girl said. She looked again at the man, who was listening carefully. "Not much to do." "How large a town is it?" Pretty small. You want more coffee?" This was addressed to the man who was rattling his cup against his saucer, and Eleanor took a first shuddering sip of her own coffee and wondered how he could possibly want more. "Do you have a lot of visitors around here?" she asked when the girl had filled the coffee cup and gone back to lounge against the shelves. "Tourists, I mean." "What for?" For a minute, the girl flashed at her from what might have been an emptiness greater than any Eleanor had ever known. "Why would anybody come here?" She looked sullenly at the man and added, "There's not even a movie." "But the hills are so pretty. Mostly with small out-of-the-way towns like this one, you'll find people who have come and built themselves homes up in the hills for privacy." The girl laughed shortly. "Not there, they don't." "Or remodeling old houses." "Privacy?" the girl said and laughed again. "It just seems surprising," Eleanor said, feeling the man looking at her. "Yeah," the girl said. "If they'd put in a movie, even." "I thought," Eleanor said carefully, "that I might even look around. Old houses are usually cheap, you know, and it's fun to make them over." "Not around here," the girl said. "Then," Eleanor said, "there are no old houses around here back in the hills?" "Nope." The man rose, taking change from his pocket, and spoke for the first time. "People leave this town," he said. "They don't come here." When the door closed behind him, the girl turned her flat eyes back to Eleanor, almost resentfully, as though Eleanor with her chatter had driven the man away. "He was right," she said finally. They go away, the lucky ones. Why don't you run away? Eleanor asked her, and the girl shrugged. Would I be any better off? She asked. She took Eleanor's money without interest and returned the change. Then, with another of her quick flashes, she glanced at the empty plates at the end of the counter and almost smiled. He comes in every day, she said. When Eleanor smiled back and started to speak, the girl turned her back and busied herself with the cups on the shelves, and Eleanor, feeling herself dismissed, rose gratefully from her coffee and took up her car keys and pocketbook. Goodbye, Eleanor said, and the girl, back still turned, said, Good luck to you. I hope you find your house. Chapter 5. The road leading away from the gas station and the church was very poor indeed, deeply rutted and rocky. Eleanor's little car stumbled and bounced, reluctant to go farther into these unattractive hills, where the day seemed quickly drawing to an end under the thick oppressive trees on either side. They do not really seem to have much traffic on this road, Eleanor thought wryly, turning the wheel quickly to avoid a particularly vicious rock ahead. 6 miles of this will not do the car any good, and for the first time in hours she thought of her sister and laughed. By now they would surely know that she had taken the car and gone, but they would not know where. They would be telling each other incredulously that they would never have suspected it of Eleanor. I would never have suspected it of myself, she thought, laughing still. Everything is different. I am a new person now, very far from home. In delay there lies no plenty. Present mirth hath present laughter. And she gasped as the car cracked against a rock and reeled back across the road with an ominous scraping somewhere beneath, but then gathered itself together valiantly and resumed its dogged climb. The tree branches brushed against the windshield, and it grew steadily darker. Hill House likes to make an entrance, she thought. I wonder if the sun ever shines along here. At last, with one final effort, the car cleared a tangle of dead leaves and small branches across the road and came into the clearing by the gate of Hill House. Why am I here? She thought helplessly and at once. Why am I here? The gate was tall and ominous and heavy, set strongly into the stone wall which went off through the trees. Even from the car, she could see the padlock and the chain that was twisted around and through the bars. Beyond the gate, she could see only that the road continued, turned, shadowed on either side by the still dark trees. Since the gate was so clearly locked and double-locked and chained and barred, who, she wondered, wants so badly to get in? She made no attempt to get out of her car, but pressed the horn, and the trees and the gate shuddered and withdrew slightly from the sound. After a minute she blew the horn again, and then saw a man coming toward her from inside the gate. He was as dark and unwelcoming as the padlock, and before he moved toward the gate, he peered through the bars at her, scowling. What you want? His voice was sharp, mean. I want to come in, please. Please unlock the gate. Who say? Oh, why, she faltered. I'm supposed to come in, she said at last. What for? I am expected. Or am I? She wondered suddenly. Is this as far as I go? Who by? She knew, of course, that he was delighting in exceeding his authority, as though once he moved to unlock the gate, he would lose the little temporary superiority he thought he had. And what superiority have I, she wondered. I am outside the gate, after all. She could already see that losing her temper, which she did rarely because she was so afraid of being ineffectual, would only turn him away, leaving her still outside the gate, railing futilely. She could even anticipate his innocence, if he were reproved later for this arrogance, the maliciously vacant grin, the wide blank eyes, the whining voice protesting that he would have let her in. He planned to let her in, but how could he be sure? He had his orders, didn't he? And he had to do what he was told. He'd be the one to get in trouble, wouldn't he, if he let in someone who wasn't supposed to be inside? She could anticipate his shrug, and picturing him, laughed, perhaps the worst thing she could have done. Eyeing her, he moved back from the gate. "You better come back later," he said, and turned his back with an air of virtuous triumph. "Listen," she called after him, still trying not to sound angry. "I am one of Dr. Montague's guests. He will be expecting me in the house. Please listen to me." He turned and grinned at her. "They couldn't rightly be expecting you," he said, "seeing as you're the only ones come so far." "Do you mean that there's no one in the house?" "No one I know of. Maybe my wife's getting it fixed up, so they couldn't be there exactly expecting you. Now, could they?" She sat back against the seat and closed her eyes. Hill House, she thought. You're as hard to get into as heaven. "I suppose you know what you're asking for, coming here. I suppose they told you, back in the city. You hear anything about this place?" "I heard that I was invited here as a guest of Dr. Montague's. When you open the gates, I will go inside." "I'll open them. I'm going to open them. I just want to be sure you know what's waiting for you in there. You ever been here before? One of the family, maybe?" He looked at her now, peering through the bars. His jeering face one more barrier, after padlock and chain. "I can't let you in till I'm sure, can I? What'd you say your name was?" She sighed. "Eleanor Vance." "Not one of the family, then, I guess. You ever hear anything about this place?" It's my chance, I suppose, she thought. I'm being given at least a chance. I could turn my car around right here and now in front of these gates and go away from here, and no one would blame me. Anyone has a right to run away. She put her head out through the car window and said with fury, "My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm expected in Hill House. Unlock those gates at once." All right. Deliberately making a wholly unnecessary display of fitting the key and turning it, he opened the padlock and loosened the chain and swung the gates just wide enough for the car to come through. Eleanor moved the car slowly, but the alacrity with which he leaped to the side of the road made her think for a minute that he had perceived the fleeting impulse crossing her mind. She laughed, and then stopped the car because he was coming toward her safely from the side. "You won't like it," he said. "You'll be sorry I ever opened that gate." "Out of the way, please," she said. "You've held me up long enough." "You think I could get anyone else to open this gate? You think anyone else stay around here that long except me and my wife? You think we can have things just about the way we want them, long as we stay around here and fix up the house and open the gates for all you city people think you know everything?" "Please, get away from my car." She dared not admit to herself that he frightened her. For fear that he might perceive it, his nearness, leaning against the side of the car, was ugly, and his enormous resentment puzzled her. She had certainly made him open the gate for her, but did he think of the house and gardens inside as his own? A name from Dr. Montague's letter came into her mind, and she asked curiously, "Are you Dudley, the caretaker?" "Yes, I'm Dudley, the caretaker," he mimicked her. "Who else do you think would be around here?" The honest old family retainer, she thought. Proud and loyal and thoroughly unpleasant. "You and your wife take care of the house all alone?" "Who else?" It was his boast, his curse, his refrain. She moved restlessly, afraid to draw away from him too obviously, and yet wanting with small motions of starting the car to make him stand aside. "I'm sure you'll be able to make us very comfortable, you and your wife," she said, putting a tone of finality in her voice. "Meanwhile, I'm very anxious to get to the house as soon as possible." He snickered disagreeably. "Me? Now," he said, "me? I don't hang around here after dark." Grinning, satisfied with himself, he stood away from the car, and Eleanor was grateful. Although awkward, starting the car under his eye. Perhaps he will keep popping out at me all along the drive, she thought. A sneering Cheshire cat, yelling each time that I should be happy to find anyone willing to hang around this place until dark anyway. To show that she was not at all affected by the thought of the face of Dudley, the caretaker, between the trees, she began to whistle, a little annoyed to find that the same tune still ran through her head. "Present mirth hath present laughter." And she told herself crossly that she must really make an effort to think of something else. She was sure that the rest of the words must be most unsuitable to hide so stubbornly from her memory, and probably wholly disreputable to be caught singing on her arrival at Hill House. Over the trees, occasionally, between them and the hills, she caught glimpses of what must be the roofs, perhaps a tower of Hill House. They made houses so oddly back when Hill House was built, she thought. They put towers and turrets and buttresses and wooden lace on them, even sometimes Gothic spires and gargoyles. Nothing was ever left undecorated. Perhaps Hill House has a tower, or a secret chamber, or even a passageway going off into the hills, and probably used by smugglers, although what could smugglers find to smuggle around these lonely hills? Perhaps I will encounter a devilishly handsome smuggler, and she turned her car onto the last stretch of straight drive, leading her directly, face to face, to Hill House, and moving without thought, pressed her foot on the brake to stall the car, and sat, staring. The house was vile. She shivered and thought the words coming freely into her mind. Hill House is vile. It is diseased. Get away from here at once. Chapter 2. No human eye can isolate the unhappy coincidence of line and place, which suggests evil in the face of a house, and yet, somehow, a maniac juxtaposition, a badly turned angle, some chance meeting of roof and sky, turned Hill House into a place of despair. More frightening because the face of Hill House seemed awake, with a watchfulness from the blank windows and a touch of glee in the eyebrow of a cornice. Almost any house, caught unexpectedly or at an odd angle, can turn a deeply humorous look on a watching person. Even a mischievous little chimney or dormer like Dimple can catch up a beholder with a sense of fellowship. But a house, arrogant and hating, never off guard, can only be evil. This house, which seemed somehow to have formed itself, flying together into its own powerful pattern under the hands of its builder, fitting itself into its own construction of lines and angles, reared to its great head back against the sky without concession to humanity. It was a house without kindness, never meant to be lived in, not a fit place for people or for love or for hope. Exorcism cannot alter the countenance of a house. Hill House would stay as it was until it was destroyed. I should have turned back at the gate, Eleanor thought. The house had caught her with an atavistic turn in the pit of the stomach, and she looked along the lines of its roofs, fruitlessly endeavoring to locate the badness, whatever dwelt there. Her hands turned nervously cold, so that she fumbled, trying to take out a cigarette. And beyond everything else, she was afraid, listening to the sick voice inside her which whispered, "Get away from here! Get away!" "But this is what I came so far to find," she told herself. "I can't go back. Besides, he would laugh at me if I tried to get back out through that gate." Trying not to look up at the house, and she could not even have told its color or its style or its size, except that it was enormous and dark, looking down over her. She started the car again and drove up the last bit of driveway, directly to the steps, which led in a forthright, no-escape manner on to the veranda, and aimed at the front door. The drive turned off on either side to encircle the house, and probably later she could take her car around and find a building of some kind to put in it. She now felt uneasily that she did not care to cut off her means of departure too completely. She turned the car just enough to move it off to one side, out of the way of later arrivals. It would be a pity, she thought grimly, for anyone to get a first look at this house with anything so comforting as a human automobile parked in front of it. And got out, taking her suitcase and her coat. "Well," she thought inadequately, "here I am." It was an act of moral strength to lift her foot and set it on the bottom step, and she thought that her deep unwillingness to touch Hill House for the first time came directly from the vivid feeling that it was waiting for her, evil but patient. Journey's end and lover's meeting, she thought, remembering her song at last, and laughed, standing on the steps of Hill House. Journey's end in lover's meeting, and she put her feet down firmly and went up to the veranda and the door. Hill House came around her in a rush. She was enshadowed, and the sound of her feet on the wood of the veranda was an outrage in the utter silence, as though it had been a very long time since feet stamped across the boards of Hill House. She brought her hand up to the heavy iron knocker that had a child's face, determined to make more noise and yet more, so that Hill House might be very sure she was there. And then the door opened without warning, and she was looking at a woman who, if like ever merited like, could only be the wife of the man at the gate. "Mrs. Dudley," she said, catching her breath, "I'm Eleanor Vance. I'm expected." Silently, the woman stood aside. Her apron was clean, her hair was neat, and yet she gave an indefinable air of dirtiness, quite in keeping with her husband, and the suspicious sullenness of her face was a match for the malicious petulance of his. "No," Eleanor told herself, "it's partly because everything seems so dark around here, and partly because I expected that man's wife to be ugly. If I hadn't seen Hill House, would I be so unfair to these people? They only take care of it after all." The hall in which they stood was overfull of dark wood and weighty carving, dim under the heaviness of the staircase, which lay back from the farther end. Above, there seemed to be another hallway, going the width of the house. She could see a wide landing, and then across the stairwell, doors closed along the upper hall. On either side of her now were great double doors, carved with fruit and grain and living things. All the doors she could see in this house were closed. When she tried to speak, her voice was drowned in the dim stillness, and she had to try again to make a sound. Can you take me to my room?" she asked at last, gesturing towards her suitcase on the floor, and watching the wavering reflection of her hand going down and down into the deep shadows of the polished floor. I gather I'm the first one here. You did say you were Mrs. Dudley. I think I'm going to cry, she thought, like a child sobbing and wailing. I don't like it here. Mrs. Dudley turned and started up the stairs, and Eleanor took up her suitcase and followed, hurrying after anything else alive in this house. No, she thought, I don't like it here. Mrs. Dudley came to the top of the stairs and turned right, and Eleanor saw that with some rare perception, the builders of the house had given up any attempt at style, probably after realizing what the house was going to be, whether they chose it or not, and had on this second floor set in a long straight hall to accommodate the doors to the bedrooms. She had a quick impression of the builders finishing off the second and third stories of the house with a kind of indecent haste, eager to finish their work without embellishment and get out of there, following the simplest possible pattern for the rooms. At the left end of the hall was a second staircase, probably going from servants' rooms on the third floor down past the second, to the service rooms below. At the right end of the hall, another room had been set in. Perhaps, since it was on the end, to get the maximum amount of sun and light, except for continuation of the dark woodwork and what looked like a series of poorly executed engravings arranged with unlovely exactness along the wall in either direction. Nothing broke the straightness of the hall, except the series of doors, all closed. Mrs. Dudley crossed the hall and opened a door, perhaps at random. "This is the blue room," she said. From the turn in the staircase, Eleanor assumed that the room would be at the front of the house. Sister Anne, she thought, and moved gratefully towards the light from the room. "How nice," she said, standing in the doorway, but only from the sense that she must say something. It was not nice at all, only barely tolerable. It held enclosed the same clashing disharmony that marked Hill House throughout. Mrs. Dudley turned aside to let Eleanor come in, and spoke apparently to the wall. "I set dinner on the dining room sideboard at 6 sharp, she said. "You can serve yourselves. I clear up in the morning. I have breakfast ready for you at 9. That's the way I agreed to do it. I can't keep the rooms up the way you'd like, but there's no one else you could get that would help me. I don't wait on people. What I agreed to, it doesn't mean I wait on people." Eleanor nodded, standing uncertainly in the doorway. "I don't stay after I set out dinner," Mrs. Dudley went on. "Not after it begins to get dark. I leave before dark comes." "I know," Eleanor said. "We live over in the town 6 miles away." "Yes," Eleanor said, remembering Hillsdale. "So there won't be anyone around if you need help." "I understand." "We couldn't even hear you in the night." "I don't suppose." "No one could. No one lives any nearer than the town. No one else will come any nearer than that." "I know," Eleanor said tiredly. "In the night," Mrs. Dudley said, and smiled outright. "In the dark," she said, and closed the door behind her. Eleanor almost giggled, thinking of herself calling, "Oh, Mrs. Dudley, I need your help in the dark." And then she shivered. She stood alone beside her suitcase, her coat still hanging over her arm, thoroughly miserable, telling herself helplessly, journey's end and lover's meeting, and wishing she could go home. Behind her lay the dark suitcase and the polished hallway and the great front door, and Mrs. Dudley and Dudley laughing at the gate, and the padlocks, and Hillsdale, and the cottage of flowers, and the family at the inn, and the oleander garden, and the house with the stone lions in front. And they had brought her, under Montague's unerring eye, to the blue room at Hill House. It's awful, she thought, unwilling to move, since motion might imply acceptance, a gesture of moving in. It's awful, and I don't want to stay, but there was nowhere else to go. Dr. Montague's letter had brought her this far and could take her no farther. After a minute she sighed and shook her head and walked across to set her suitcase down on the bed. Here I am in the blue room of Hill House, she said, half aloud. Although it was real enough, and beyond all question, a blue room, there were blue dimity curtains over the two windows which looked out over the roof of the veranda onto the lawn, a blue figured rug on the floor, and a blue spread on the bed, and a blue quilt at the foot. The walls, dark woodwork to shoulder height, were blue figured paper above, with a design of tiny blue flowers, wreathed and gathered and delicate. Perhaps someone had once hoped to lighten the air of the blue room in Hill House with a dainty wallpaper, not seeing how much a hope would evaporate in Hill House, leaving only the faintest hint of its existence. Eleanor shook herself, turning to see the room complete. It had an unbelievably faulty design which left it chillingly wrong in all its dimensions, so that the walls seemed always in one direction a fraction longer than the eye could endure, and in another direction a fraction less than the barest possible tolerable length. This is where they want me to sleep, Eleanor thought incredulously. What nightmares are waiting, shadowed in those high corners? What breath of mindless fear will drift across my mouth? And shook herself again. Really, she told herself, really, Eleanor. She opened her suitcase on the high bed and, slipping off her stiff city shoes with grateful relief, began to unpack. At the back of her mind, the thoroughly female conviction that the best way to soothe a troubled mind is to put on comfortable shoes. Yesterday, packing her suitcase in the city, she had chosen clothes which she assumed would be suitable for wearing in an isolated country house. She had even run out at the last minute and bought, excited at her own daring, 2 pairs of slacks, something she had not worn in more years than she could remember. Mother would be furious, she had thought, packing the slacks down at the bottom of her suitcase, so that she need not take them out, need never let anyone know she had them, in case she lost her courage. Now, in Hill House, they no longer seemed so new. She unpacked carelessly, setting dresses crookedly on hangers, tossing the slacks into the bottom drawer of a high marble-top dresser, throwing her city shoes into a corner of the great wardrobe. She was bored already with the books she had brought. I'm probably not going to stay anyway, she thought, and closed her empty suitcase and set it in the wardrobe corner. It won't take me 5 minutes to pack again. She discovered that she had been trying to put her suitcase down without making a sound, and then realized that while she unpacked, she had been in her stockinged feet, trying to move as silently as possible, as though stillness were vital in Hill House. She remembered that Mrs. Dudley had also walked without sound. When she stood still in the middle of the room, the pressing silence of Hill House came back all around her. I'm like a small creature swallowed whole by a monster, she thought, and the monster feels my tiny little movements inside. No, she said aloud, and the one word echoed. She went quickly across the room and pushed aside the blue dimity curtains, but the sunlight came only palely through the thick glass of the windows, and she could see only the roof of the veranda and a stretch of the lawn beyond. Somewhere, down there, was her little car, which could take her away again. Journeys end and lovers meeting, she thought. It was my own choice to come. Then she realized that she was afraid to go back across the room. She was standing with her back to the window, looking from the door to the wardrobe, to the dresser to the bed, telling herself that she was not afraid at all, when she heard far below the sounds of a car door slamming, and then quick footsteps, almost dancing, up the steps and across the veranda. And then, shockingly, the crash of the great iron knocker coming down. Why, she thought, there are other people coming. I'm not going to be here all alone. Almost laughing, she ran across the room and into the hall to look down the staircase into the hallway below. Thank heaven you're here, she said, peering through the dimness. Thank heaven somebody's here. She realized without surprise that she was speaking as though Mrs. Dudley could not hear her, although Mrs. Dudley stood, straight and pale, in the hall. Come on up, Eleanor said. You'll have to carry your own suitcase. She was breathless and seemed unable to stop talking. Her usual shyness melted away by relief. My name's Eleanor Vance, she said, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm Theodora, just Theodora. This bloody house. It's just as bad up here. Come on up. Make her give you the room next to mine. Theodora came up the heavy stairway after Mrs. Dudley, looking incredulously at the stained glass window on the landing, the marble urn in a niche, the patterned carpet. Her suitcase was considerably larger than Eleanor's and considerably more luxurious, and Eleanor came forward to help her, glad that her own things were safely put away out of sight. Wait till you see the bedrooms, Eleanor said. Mine used to be the embalming room, I think. It's the home I've always dreamed of, Theodora said. A little hideaway where I can be alone with my thoughts, particularly if my thoughts happen to be about murder or suicide or... Green room, Mrs. Dudley said coldly, and Eleanor sensed with a quick turn of apprehension that flippant or critical talk about the house bothered Mrs. Dudley in some way. Maybe she thinks it can hear us, Eleanor thought, and then was sorry she had thought it. Perhaps she shivered because Theodora turned with a quick smile and touched her shoulder gently, reassuringly. She is charming, Eleanor thought, smiling back, not at all the sort of person who belongs in this dreary, dark place, but then, probably, I don't belong here either. I'm not the sort of person for Hill House, but I can't think of anybody who would be. She laughed then, watching Theodora's expression as she stood in the doorway of the green room. Good Lord, Theodora said, looking sideways at Eleanor. How perfectly enchanting. A positive power. I set dinner on the dining room sideboard at 6 sharp, Mrs. Dudley said. You can serve yourselves. I clear up in the morning. I have breakfast ready for you at 9. That's the way I agreed to do it. You're frightened, Theodora said, watching Eleanor. I can't keep the rooms up the way you'd like, but there's no one else you can get that would help me. I don't wait on people. What I agreed to, it doesn't mean I wait on people. It was just when I thought I was all alone, Eleanor said. I don't stay after 6, not after it begins to get dark. I'm here now, Theodora said, so it's all right. We have a connecting bathroom, Eleanor said absurdly. The rooms are exactly alike. Green dimity curtains hung over the windows in Theodora's room. The wallpaper was decked with green garlands. The bedspread and quilt were green. The marble-top dresser and the huge wardrobe were the same. I've never seen such awful places in my life, Eleanor said, her voice rising. Like the very best hotels, Theodora said, or any good girls' camp. I leave before dark comes, Mrs. Dudley went on. No one can hear you if you scream in the night. Eleanor told Theodora. She realized that she was clutching at the doorknob, and under Theodora's quizzical eye, unclenched her fingers and walked steadily across the room. "We'll have to find some way of opening these windows," she said. "So there won't be anyone around if you need help," Mrs. Dudley said. "We couldn't hear you even in the night. No one could." "All right now?" Theodora asked, and Eleanor nodded. "No one lives any nearer than the town. No one else will come any nearer than that." "You're probably just hungry," Theodora said, "and I'm starved myself." She set her suitcase on the bed and slipped off her shoes. "Nothing," she said, "upsets me more than being hungry." I snarl and snap and burst into tears. She lifted a pair of softly tailored slacks out of the suitcase. "In the night," Mrs. Dudley said. She smiled. "In the dark," she said, and closed the door behind her. After a minute, Eleanor said, "She also walks without making a sound." "Delightful body." Theodora turned, regarding her room. "I take it back. That about the best hotels," she said. "It's a little bit like a boarding school I went to for a while." "Come and see mine," Eleanor said. She opened the bathroom door and led the way into her blue room. "I was all unpacked and thinking about packing again when you came." "Poor baby, you're certainly starving. All I could think of when I got a look at the place from outside was what fun it would be to stand out there and watch it burn down. Maybe before we leave." "It was terrible being here alone." "You should have seen that boarding school of mine during vacations." Theodora went back into her own room. With the sense of movement and sound in the two rooms, Eleanor felt more cheerful. She straightened her clothes on the hangers in the wardrobe and set her books evenly on the bed table. "You know," Theodora called from the other room, "it is kind of like the first day at school. Everything's ugly and strange, and you don't know anybody, and you're afraid everybody's going to laugh at your clothes." Eleanor, who had opened the dresser drawer to take out a pair of slacks, stopped, and then laughed, and threw the slacks on the bed. "Did I understand correctly," Theodora went on, "that Mrs. Dudley is not going to come if we scream in the night?" "It's not what she agreed to. Did you meet the amiable old retainer at the gate?" "We had a lovely chat. He said I couldn't come in, and I said I could. And then I tried to run him down with my car, but he jumped. Look, do you think we have to sit around here in our rooms and wait? I'd like to change into something comfortable. Unless we dress for dinner, do you think?" "I won't if you won't." "I won't if you won't. They can't fight both of us. Anyway, let's get out of here and go exploring. I would very much like to get this roof off from over my head." "It gets dark so early in these hills with all the trees." Eleanor went to the window again, but there was still sunlight slanting across the lawn. "It won't be really dark for nearly an hour. I want to go outside and roll on the grass." Eleanor chose a red sweater, thinking that in this room, in this house, the red of the sweater and the red of the sandals, bought to match it, would almost certainly be utterly at war with each other, although they had been close enough yesterday in the city. "Serves me right anyway," she thought, "for wanting to wear such things. I never did before." But she looked oddly well, it seemed to her, as she stood by the long mirror on the wardrobe door, almost comfortable. "Do you have any idea who else is coming?" she asked, or when?" "Dr. Montague," Theodora said. "I thought he'd be here before anyone else." "Have you known Dr. Montague long?" "Never met him," Theodora said. "Have you?" "Never. You almost ready? All ready. Theodora came through the bathroom door into Eleanor's room. She is lovely, Eleanor thought, turning to look. I wish I were lovely. Theodora was wearing a vivid yellow shirt, and Eleanor laughed and said, You bring more light into this room than the window. Theodora came over and regarded herself approvingly in Eleanor's mirror. I feel, she said, that in this dreary place it is our duty to look as bright as possible. I approve of your red sweater. The two of us will be visible from one end of Hill House to the other. Still looking into the mirror, she asked, I suppose Dr. Montague wrote to you? Yes. Eleanor was embarrassed. I didn't know at first whether it was a joke or not, but my brother-in-law checked up on him. You know, Theodora said slowly, up until the last minute, when I got to the gates, I guess, I never really thought there would be a Hill House. You don't go around expecting things like this to happen. But some of us go around hoping, Eleanor said. Theodora laughed and swung around before the mirror and caught Eleanor's hand. Fellow babe in the woods, she said, let's go exploring. We can't go far away from the house. I promise not to go one step farther than you say. Do you think we have to check in and out with Mrs. Dudley? She probably watches every move we make anyway. It's probably part of what she agreed to. Agreed to with whom, I wonder? Count Dracula? You think he lives in Hill House? I think he spends all his weekends here. I swear, I saw bats in the woodwork downstairs. Follow, follow! They ran downstairs, moving with color and life against the dark woodwork and the clouded light of the stairs, their feet clattering. And Mrs. Dudley stood below and watched them in silence. We're going exploring, Mrs. Dudley, Theodora said lightly. We'll be outside somewhere. We'll be back soon, Eleanor added. I set dinner on the sideboard at 6:00, Mrs. Dudley explained. Eleanor, tugging, got the great front door open. It was just as heavy as it looked, and she thought, we will really have to find some easier way to get back in. Leave this open, she said over her shoulder to Theodora. It's terribly heavy. Get one of those big vases and prop it open. Theodora wheeled one of the big stone vases from the corner of the hall, and they stood it in the doorway and rested the door against it. The fading sunlight outside was bright after the darkness of the house, and the air was fresh and sweet. Behind them, Mrs. Dudley moved the vase again, and the big door slammed shut. Lovable old thing, Theodora said to the closed door. For a moment her face was thin with anger, and Eleanor thought, I hope she never looks at me like that, and was surprised, remembering that she was always shy with strangers, awkward and timid, and yet had come in no more than half an hour to think of Theodora as close and vital, someone whose anger would be frightening. I think, Eleanor said hesitantly and relaxed, because when she spoke, Theodora turned and smiled again. I think that during the daylight hours when Mrs. Dudley is around, I shall find myself some absorbing occupation far, far from the house, rolling the tennis court perhaps, or tending the grapes in the hothouse. Perhaps you could help Dudley with the gates, or look for nameless graves in the nettle patch. They were standing by the rail of the veranda. From there, they could see down the drive to the point where it turned among the trees again, and down over the soft curve of the hills to the distant small line which might have been the main highway, the road back to the cities from which they had come, except from the wires which ran to the house from a spot among the trees, There was no evidence that Hill House belonged in any way to the rest of the world. Eleanor turned and followed the veranda. It went apparently all around the house. "Oh, look," she said, turning the corner. Behind the house, the hills were piled in great, pressing masses, flooded with summer green now, rich and still. "It's why they called it Hill House," Eleanor said inadequately. "It's altogether Victorian," Theodora said. "They simply wallowed in this kind of great billowing overdone sort of thing and buried themselves in folds of velvet and tassels and purple plush. Anyone before them or after would have put this house right up there on top of those hills where it belongs, instead of snuggling it down here." "If it were on top of the hill, everybody could see it. I vote for keeping it well hidden where it is." "All the time I'm here, I'm going to be terrified," Theodora said, "thinking one of those hills will fall on us." "They don't fall on you. They just slide down silently and secretly, rolling over you while you try to run away." "Oh, thank you," Theodora said in a small voice. "What Mrs. Dudley has started, you have completed nicely. I shall pack and go home at once." Believing her for a minute, Eleanor turned and stared, and then saw the amusement on her face and thought, "She's much braver than I am." Unexpectedly, although it was later to become a familiar note, a recognizable attribute of what was to mean Theodora in Eleanor's mind, Theodora caught at Eleanor's thought and answered her. "Don't be so afraid all the time," she said, and reached out to touch Eleanor's cheek with one finger. "We never know where our courage is coming from." Then quickly she ran down the steps and out onto the lawn between the tall grouped trees. "Hurry," she called back. "I want to see if there's a brook somewhere." "We can't go too far," Eleanor said, following. Like two children, they ran across the grass, both welcoming the sudden openness of clear spaces after even a little time in Hill House. Their feet, grateful for the grass after the solid floors. With an instinct almost animal, they followed the sound and smell of water. "Over here," Theodora said. "A little path." It led them tantalizingly closer to the sound of the water, doubling back and forth through the trees, giving them occasional glimpses down the hill to the driveway, leading them around out of sight of the house, across a rocky meadow, and always downhill. As they came away from the house and out of the trees to places where the sunlight could still find them, Eleanor was easier, although she could see that the sun was dropping disturbingly close to the heaped hills. She called to Theodora, but Theodora only called back, "Follow, follow," and ran down the path. Suddenly she stopped, breathless and tottering, on the very edge of the brook, which had leaped up before her, almost without warning. Eleanor, coming more slowly behind, caught at her hand and held her back, and then laughing, they fell together against the bank, which sloped sharply down to the brook. "They like to surprise you around here," Theodora said, gasping. "Serve you right if you went diving in," Eleanor said, "running like that." "It's pretty, isn't it?" The water of the brook moved quickly, in little lighted ripples. On the other side, the grass grew down to the edge of the water, and yellow and blue flowers leaned their heads over. There was a rounded, soft hill there, and perhaps more meadow beyond, and far away the great hills, still catching the light of the sun. "It's pretty," Theodora said with finality. "I'm sure I've been here before," Eleanor said. "In a book of fairy tales, perhaps." "I'm sure of it. Can you skip rocks?" "This is where the princess comes to meet the magic golden fish, who's really a prince in disguise." "He couldn't draw much water, that golden fish of yours. It can't be more than 3 inches deep." There are stepping stones to go across, and little fish swimming, tiny ones, minnows. Princes in disguise, all of them. Theodora stretched in the sun on the bank and yawned. Oh, tadpoles, she suggested. Minnows. It's too late for tadpoles, silly, but I bet we can find frogs' eggs. I used to catch minnows in my hands and let them go. What a farmer's wife you might have made. This is a place for picnics, with lunch beside the brook and hard-boiled eggs. Theodora laughed. Chicken salad and chocolate cake. Lemonade in a thermos, spilled salt. Theodora rolled over luxuriously. They're wrong about ants, you know. There were almost never ants. Cows, maybe, but I don't think I ever did see an ant on a picnic. Was there always a bull in a field? Does someone always say, but we can't go through that field, that's where the bull is? Theodora opened one eye. Did you used to have a comic uncle? Everyone always laughed, whatever he said. And he used to tell you not to be afraid of the bull. If the bull came after you, all you had to do was grab the ring through his nose and swing him around your head. Eleanor tossed a pebble into the brook and watched it sink, clearly to the bottom. Did you have a lot of uncles? Thousands. Do you? After a minute, Eleanor said, Oh, yes, big ones and little ones and fat ones and thin ones. Do you have an Aunt Edna? Aunt Muriel. Kind of thin, rimless glasses. A garnet brooch, Eleanor said. Does she wear a kind of dark red dress to family parties? Lace cuffs. Then I think we must really be related, Theodora said. Did you used to have braces on your teeth? No, freckles. I went to that private school where they made me learn to curtsy. I always had colds all winter long. My mother made me wear woolen stockings. My mother made my brother take me to dances, and I used to curtsy like mad. My brother still hates me. I fell down during the graduation procession. I forgot my lines in the operetta. I used to write poetry. Yes, Theodora said. I'm positive we're cousins. She sat up laughing, and then Eleanor said, Be quiet. There's something moving over there. Frozen, shoulders pressed together, they stared, watching the spot of hillside across the brook where the grass moved, watching something unseen move slowly across the bright green hill, chilling the sunlight and the dancing little brook. What is it? Eleanor said in a breath, and Theodora put a strong hand on her wrist. It's gone, Theodora said clearly, and the sun came back and it was warm again. It was a rabbit, Theodora said. I couldn't see it, Eleanor said. I saw it the minute you spoke, Theodora said firmly. It was a rabbit. It went over the hill and out of sight. We've been away too long, Eleanor said, and looked up anxiously at the sun, touching the hilltops. She got up quickly and found that her legs were stiff from kneeling on the damp grass. Imagine 2 splendid old picnic-going girls like us, Theodora said, afraid of a rabbit. Eleanor leaned down and held out a hand to help her up. We'd really better hurry back, she said, and because she did not herself understand her compelling anxiety, added, the others might be there by now. We'll have to come back here for a picnic soon, Theodora said, following carefully up the path, which went steadily uphill. We really must have a good old-fashioned picnic, down by the brook. We can ask Mrs. Dudley to hard-boil some eggs. Eleanor stopped on the path, not turning. Theodora, she said, I don't think I can, you know. I don't think I really will be able to do it. Eleanor. Theodora put an arm across her shoulders. Would you let them separate us now? Now that we've found out we're cousins?